it's an awesome book too, and it's from a guy who's actually lived it. You know, there's a lot of wisdom in his life experiences that you can get something out of. I ask because you obviously are a guy who seeks out knowledge, right? You work on your mind. What was it? Was it a book or was it a series of books? Like what got you thinking differently?
Well, honestly, for me, what got me thinking differently was honestly just going through the most trying time of my life. I mean, I had just gotten married. Now it's time to be a man. Now it's time to step up. Now it's time to provide. And all of a sudden, I go through this loss streak where after my third loss, I went home to San Diego with my wife. We sat on the couch and we sit there and we just cried.
Who was the third loss?
Third loss was Will Brooks the second time.
Oh, that's right.
So I lost to him twice, Eddie once, and then now the Madison Square Garden one. But we went home, we sat there, and it was almost like, what do we do now? Is Bellator going to cut me? Did I work this hard to now, be where I'm at now? I was a 2 years or year and a half removed from being one of the top 3 guys in the world. Had just beaten Eddie and, all that kind of stuff. And now here I was 3 fights in a row lost. But it was that time where I realized, I was actually starting to change my kind of mental training and stuff. I was starting my mental training as I was going into that third fight, or that third loss, that second fight with Will Brooks. But I just hadn't been there yet. And honestly, that one was more just like I got caught, But that was really what kind of set the trigger. And I think I just started to realize, Michael, why? You sit there and you tell people you want to be the best. Your actions speak louder than your words. You work harder than everybody else. You show up first. You're the last one to leave. You take care of your body. You do all the right things. At the end of the day, somebody has to be the best. Why shouldn't it be you? And I kept asking myself that question. And the only answer I could come up with was, I deserve to be the best. I really do. And I can say that with humility to say, I really do deserve to be the best guy in the entire world at lightweight. Now, nobody works harder than I do. Nobody takes care of themselves better than I do. Nobody has made the sacrifices that I have, and nobody lives the clean lifestyle like I do and has a calling on their life like I do. Yet, when it came down to it, it has taken years and years and decades to almost erase the small-mindedness that I've had in my past. And we're all just a constant work in progress. And I think I came up with work hard, good things might happen, but most likely you'll be mediocre. That was kind of my mindset.
But what did you do different? Like what did you change?
For me, reading books.
Like what specifically? Do you remember? Like what triggered it or what helped you?
There was a book called Mind Gym. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Mind Gym. And he talks about making a mental highlight reel. And since that day, I've made mental highlight reels every couple months. And even right now, to this day, there's on my mental highlight reel right now is beating Kyler Sanderson at Mizzou on senior night when him and I were ranked at the same. We were ranked like 4th and 5th in the country, and not that I wasn't supposed to beat him, but the manner in which I beat him, I almost majored him. And it was one of those breakthrough moments where I gave myself permission in front of everybody to just go out there and beat a guy handedly.
This is a wrestling match.
And it was a wrestling match, you know?
So when you say make a mental highlight reel, this is of your past accomplishments?
Past accomplishments. And I think the biggest detriment, the biggest detriment to the people that work hard and expect a lot of themselves is when you have achievements, you don't take time to smell the roses. You don't take time to pat yourself on the back. You think that, okay, well, if I stop and I say, you know what, I am good. Oh my gosh, I did do a great job. Holy cow, I was dominant. You're not supposed to do that because that's prideful and that's conceited and that's narcissistic. But really, if you're not your biggest fan, who's going to be, And I think that's what I always did. I would accomplish something and I'd say, okay, well, I'm supposed to accomplish that. I won this tournament. Well, I was supposed to. You were
But
ranked.
There's a balance, right? There's a balance between patting yourself on the back too much and kissing your own ass and believing your own bullshit. And we see what happens with those guys. That's almost worse.
Exactly. Well, and I think we've all seen those cases too.
Yeah.
We've all seen those cases where you see one guy, pride comes before the fall, and then all of a sudden the fall happens. You say, okay, well, I don't want to do that.
Right.
But there is that fine line, that middle ground where it's like, it's okay to love yourself. It's okay to look at yourself in the mirror and say, that man right there standing in front of me in the mirror is a badass, and you deserve to be extremely successful. But then when you go out in the world, that you don't walk around like you're better than people. You don't walk around like, So I mean, there is no, a finite A plus B equals C type of way to live, but there is that middle ground between being your biggest fan, taking time to stop and pat yourself on the back and realize your accomplishments, which the mental highlight reel thing is something great, because you can go through 10 things in your past and just continuing to remember those times where you were in your flow state, where you absolutely performed at a ridiculous level that you kind of surprised yourself almost. And I think that continues to happen step by step and brick by boring brick. You make these little bitty accomplishments, and as long as you continue to remember them, you can continue to increase that confident capacity that you should have, and start to go from, man, I didn't know I was capable of this, to now the confident expectancy of, okay, I said I deserve it, but now I really am starting to believe that I deserve it. And then once you actually believe, then you get in those scenarios where it's you versus him, and someone's got to win. So it's you most of the time now.
So this flow state thing, so like when you're in a state where you feel like everything is just clicking, how do you try to recreate that in your mind to remember that state?
I think it is writing things down after a practice, or honestly, sometimes what I like to do is...
Do you do that? You like have a journal, a training journal?
Yeah, try to write things down. I mean, and that's things too that can be added to a mental highlight reel, like having a really great sparring day, and then remembering what you had for breakfast, remembering how your day started, remember whether you did or did not watch TV before practice, or, those little things. And then I always talk about working extremely hard and surrounding yourself with the best people possible. And that's why I moved out to Las Vegas right when I started fighting, and then moved to San Diego, and then moved my training camp to Arizona, and then now Florida, and now, so I've moved all over the country to find the best guys I possibly can. So when you have a great day like that, sit down with the coaches and say, hey, coach, talking to Henry or Evan or Kami or one of these guys that is coaching me right now, and talk about it, like almost overly talk about it, which those guys are always annoying to me, or they always used to be, like, hey, I did this right, and I did this right, and I did this right, because I always thought, well, you should just work. You shouldn't talk, just work. But I've started to realize that those things need to be vocalized, or they get swept under the rug, and you forget that you had a great day. So now we sit down and we talk and we say, hey man, that 3-2 was really, really working great off the feint, and we worked that yesterday as we were hitting mitts, and now you're continuing to show yourself that this thing really actually does work. You're not just working to work, you're working smart. And then you see that the working smart actually turns into results. And then you're like a lab rat in the gym working on these little experiments that you're making, and you're actually collecting the data and seeing the results.
Now, when you're talking about doing a mental highlight reel thing, is this sort of a rebuilding exercise, a rebuilding confidence exercise, or is this just a solidifying skill set and understanding your potential because you've already done things before? Like, because you were in a bad spot when you started doing this, and is this when you started constructing this highlight reel thing?
That's when I actually read the book in college, and then found it on my shelf one day.
Do you know who wrote it? Mind Gym? See, you find it, Jimmy?
Gary Mack.
Gary Mack.
Powerful Gary Mack.
Yeah, and then there was just a bunch of, and there was another book, don't remind me, it's called How Champions Think. And it was just a bunch of instances where they were talking about Tiger Woods, they were talking about this guy or that guy, and then one of the chapters was doing a mental highlight reel. And I think it can be used for both. I mean, you should do one today. We should all do one today, whether you're in a great place, whether you just closed the biggest business deal you ever possibly could, or you just are down in the dumps because you feel like the biggest loser on earth. You do a mental highlight reel to it's just like going to the gym, and then it changes. Maybe this month is different than next month. Maybe you wipe off an old one and you put on a brand new one that you just remembered, because sometimes we forget successes that we have. It takes me going to my Wikipedia page, or me, going on some old interviews, or somebody telling me on Twitter, hey, remember that time you did this, for me to actually remember the successes that I've had, because I've been conditioned to pull myself up by my bootstraps every single day and forget about all my accomplishments of my past, because those don't matter. Those are what I used to look as stumbling blocks, because what got you here isn't going to get you where you want to go. And we have that that mentality, but you have to take the time to remember and almost look at yourself the way other people see you, because we all are our biggest critics. The way my fans see me, the way you watch me fight is, and the way you see my abilities is probably even better than I have seen myself a lot in my past. From an outside perspective, it's so much easier to look at someone outside perspective, because our own inner monologue, or our own self-image dummies down who we are and how much we want to accomplish. Not all of us. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are cocky, narcissistic people who think they are the,
Those people have the hardest time coming back from losses, though.
Big time. Yeah,
it seems like when they get head kicked or something and then they realize they're human, it's like, whoa. You see it with a lot of those guys where they don't, instead of facing their demons, what they've done is create this delusional self-image. And when that delusional self-image gets shattered and it's an undeniable reality that there's people that are better than them, it's very, very difficult for them to bounce back.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think I am by no means the poster child for that. I mean, it took me a loss that carried me into another loss and another loss. I went 688 days without a win. And but when I write a book someday it's going to be called 688 Days. And that's how long it took me to go from loss to win. And that's a long time.
That's a long fucking
time. It's a long time to question yourself every single day, to wake up in the morning wondering if you were going to have a paycheck, wondering if you were going to get a phone call from your manager, wondering if you really wanted to open up your phone and see all the negative comments that I told you Michael Chandler wasn't as good as we all thought he was.
Oh, you don't
I can't believe I believed it.
You can't read that, dude.
But I mean, not even just the fans. It was, the media wrote me off and everybody. You get written off and it shapes the reality when really the reality was, man, I was put on this earth to do some great things, but it just took me. I look at it now and I think, if bad things happen to you, but a good thing comes from it, was it really a bad thing? And I look at it and I say, everybody's got losses. It's not a big deal. I remember the sting. I remember the pain. I remember the embarrassment. I mean, what we also got to remember too is this is embarrassing. You lose a fight, that's embarrassing.
It's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, so it's tough.
Especially when you were a former champion and then you're going these 600 plus days without a win. And it really highlights the difficult nature of fighting as opposed to any other sport where, there's times where it's entirely likely that you're going to go a long time without competing again.
Yeah.
You could go 6 months without competing again. You can go 8 months. Guys go a year if you get injured.
Yep.
That's a long fucking time. Any other sport, if you lose a baseball game, you drop a ball, like you're back at it
next day.
The next day.
Same thing with wrestling.
Yeah.
Wrestling was great because you lost a match on Saturday. You were able to come back in the duel on Wednesday or even the next Saturday. 7 days you had to go. You know, I mean, a lot of times, barring injuries or whatnot. I mean, it could be a year before you get to step back in the cage again. And then every single day you spend questioning, and every single day you also just end up putting so much pressure on yourself. I mean, the biggest thing that I did wrong was I came into this sport. And literally 18 months after starting the sport, I was in a cage with Eddie Alvarez, top 5 guy in the world, beat Eddie Alvarez. Then it was like, okay, now you have to perform.
That was that soon after starting the sport?
Yeah. August of 2009, I had my first fight, and then I fought him in 2011.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And you finished him.
But then now the real game starts. Now it's like, okay, hey, you're there. You're ranked in the top 3, top 5. Your whole future depends on every single fight. And then instead of think about every single fight, you think about every single practice. And instead of think about every single practice, you think about every single round in practice, and not just every round, but every minute in practice. So you hit me with a 1-2, immediately that's a loss in my mind. So now I have to come back and get it. So instead of just focusing on success, I was focusing on perfection. So every single day I was trying to be perfect, and you can't be perfect. The greatest athletes in the world will tell you they are not perfect. They fail time and time and time again. But I put all this pressure on myself to where I put myself in this prison of, Michael, you suck because you just lost to this guy who's not even signed to any organization at all, and you just lost to him in this sparring round. And my view of what the loss was different than my coach who watched it. He said, no, you did all right. You didn't lose horribly, but in my mind, I lost horribly. I would have got finished, blah, 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 all the kind of like crazy stuff, So that's the thing too, is I started focusing on success and not perfection. Stop putting so much pressure on yourself to be perfect. Just focus on being successful. And now I'm focusing on the big picture of being successful instead of these little bitty instances where I'm trying to be perfect.
Now, when you look at yourself and you look at your overall MMA skill set, do you try to look at it almost like as if you're managing yourself, not managing yourself like a fight manager, but like like a project,
Yep.
like looking at it like, okay, this is what we need to work on. This is how I need to tighten this up and do you look at it as like an overall long-term project? Like how do you visualize it?
Yeah, I mean, and I get that question a lot too. Is like, well, hey, how do you prepare for an opponent? And honestly, I'd say almost 90% of my training is focusing on myself. I mean, because if I put the right systems in place, if I get the right skill sets as sharp as they can be for fight night, there's not a guy in the lightweight division in the entire world that I think can beat me.